This is our presentation on internal employee relations. I'm Nicholas Duffy.
I'm Zach Vogel.
I'm Dylan Marshall.
I'm Matt Miller.
I'm Parker Smith.
So some key points of this chapter to know are internal employee relations, where the human resource management activities associated with the movement of employees within the organization, disciplinary action, invoking a penalty against an employee who fails to meet established standards, just cause, standard for determining whether to terminate an employee, and the standard is based on whether an employee violated company policy or work rules and the severity of the violation. And employment at will, unwritten contract to where an employee agrees to work for an employer, but no agreement exists as to how long that employment will last. Next slide. Some approaches to disciplinary action, which go more into detail in the future. The hot stove rule, progressive disciplinary action without punishment, and termination. And then we've got a video.
How do you deal with a disciplinary issue? Well, unfortunately, it does involve a certain amount of red tape, but I see my role as making your life easier by making sure you don't get tangled up in it. The ACAS Code of Practice and Disciplinary Grievance Procedures underpins this whole area. I would strongly recommend you go and find yourself with it before you start. If you end up dismissing someone, you need to be able to show that you followed a fair procedure. If you lose a claim for unfair dismissal, the tribunal finds that your failure to follow a fair procedure is unreasonable, your employee could benefit from an uplift to their compensation that makes your failure all the more costly for your business. There are certain practicalities to bear in mind throughout this process. First of all, keep written records or notes of all steps taken. But remember, it's very likely that you'll need to give these notes to your employee at some point, so be careful what you write in them. You and anybody else involved in the process, including the employee, needs to maintain confidentiality. You need to act promptly. If there's an issue, don't wait 2 or 3 months to deal with it. It will only make it more difficult. And you need to communicate your decisions effectively with reasons for any decisions taken. So asked in the first instance, can you deal with it informally? Sometimes a quiet word with an employee can nip something in the bud before it escalates into something much worse. It's likely that you can only use this for minor issues, and if you do, make sure your meeting is still confidential and private. Your employee needs to know what the problem is, how it's arisen, and what action is needed in the future. Keep a note of what's said and send it to your employee, making sure they know a formal process might be followed if the issue isn't resolved. If you don't think informal action is appropriate, or if that doesn't work, you need to investigate the allegations thoroughly. That's the case even if it's a very clear-cut decision and you think there's no doubt of guilt. You need to establish what the facts are. Something might come to light during the investigation, which is an entirely reasonable explanation. The amount of investigation you need to do will vary depending on the situation, but it must be reasonable in all the circumstances. Mostly, the more serious the conduct, the more serious the consequences, the more investigation you're going to have to do. So far as who should conduct it goes, you already need to be thinking at this stage about separate personnel for each stage. Ideally, you'd have 3 different people, one for the investigation, one for the disciplinary hearing, and one for the appeal. So think about who can do each stage right from the outset. You might also want to think about suspending your employee. It's not a disciplinary sanction in itself, but it can sometimes be helpful if you think your investigation might be hampered by having a business, or if they might otherwise be damaging to what's going on. So let's say your investigation decides disciplinary action is warranted. What does a disciplinary hearing look like? You need to invite your employee in writing, giving them as much information as they need to be able to respond to the allegations against them. They also need to understand what the consequences could be. So if that's a written warning, a dismissal, set that out in the invitation letter as a possibility at this stage. The hearing itself should not be treated as something quasi-judicial. It's between you and your employee. You need to set out the case against them and give them a full opportunity to respond. They're entitled to be accompanied at the meeting, either by a work colleague or a trade union representative, but not by a legal representative. Further investigation might be needed depending on what comes out of it, and if that's the case, you'll need to adjourn and reconvene at a later date. The decision itself should be confirmed in writing, giving clear information on whether it's a warning, a dismissal, or, if the employee's contract permits it, some other sanction, like demotion or a pay cut. Whatever your decision, it must be fair and reasonable, and must be based on a genuine belief of guilt on reasonable grounds. The last stage will always be the appeal stage, in case the employee is dissatisfied with the outcome. The right to appeal should be communicated in the decision letter with a time frame for lodging their appeal. It should be conducted by someone who hasn't been previously involved and can either be done as a review of the decision or a rehearing of all the evidence. If you are seen to be dealing with issues promptly and transparently, your employees are more likely to continue to work well together with you and the business.
Okay, we're on to employment at will. The legal doctrine that specifies that employment may be terminated by either the employer or employee for any reason. For unionized workers, a collective bargaining agreement sets aside an employer's ability to use employment at will provisions because the term of employment are managed in accordance with the provisions of the collective bargaining agreement. Hiring standards to avoid are things such as race, religion, age, national origin, and disabilities. And approximately 2 of every 3 U.S. workers depend on the goodwill of their employer, known as at-will employees. Discipline and disciplinary action. Discipline is the state of employee self-control and orderly conduct that indicates the extent of genuine teamwork within the organization. Disciplinary action is invoking a penalty against an employee who fails to meet established standards. Even though disciplinary action may be unpleasant, at times it must be done. Effective disciplinary action addresses the employee's wrongful behavior, not the employee as a person. Disciplinary action is usually not management's initial response to a problem. And the disciplinary action process is dynamic and ongoing. The proper application of disciplinary action fosters acceptable behavior by other group members. Unjustified disciplinary action can have a detrimental effect on other group members. Changes in the external environment, such as technological innovations, may render a role inappropriate and may necessitate creating new roles. Through organization development, the firm may change its employer brand. Because of the shift, first-line supervisors may begin to handle disciplinary action more positively.
Okay, for employment termination, just cause is a standard for determining whether to terminate an employee, and the standard is based on whether an employee violated company policy or work rules and the severity of the violation. When the decision is made to terminate a worker, the employee should not be surprised because he or she should have been given explicit warning prior to being fired. The employee should be given outplacement, which is fired employees given the assistance in finding employment elsewhere.
Now we're going to move on to retirement. So there's a variety of different retirement plans a company can offer. The most common one is the traditional retirement plan. Some choose to keep working either because they're healthy or can't afford to retire. That's another reason some people don't retire. And phased retirement is a great option because they allow you to slowly retire from the company. It allows for a company to reduce the labor costs without killing the employee's morale. So phased retirement is definitely an option companies like to go. All right, next we're going to talk about resignation. So even when an organization has a good work environment, people are still going to resign. Some that can't or aren't being promoted to a higher rank often leave to find somewhere that will promote them. Some turnover is necessary to afford employees the opportunity to fulfill career objectives. However, there is a limit to how much turnover is a good thing.
So now we're going to talk about promotions within a company. Promotion is the movement of an employee to a higher level position within the company. This includes additional pay raises, financial rewards, and ego boost to employees. When employees feel proud and that they're being promoted, this can lead to a better workplace for that employee. There are some concerns though within the company when employees do get promoted. Employees who didn't get a promotion may feel jealous or upset that they didn't get that promotion. This can lead to some employees slacking off or even quitting the job. So it's important that promotions don't discriminate against any employee based on age, religion, sex, color, or pregnancy.
All right, more consideration for internal employee relations. A transfer may be initiated by the firm or by an employee. The process does not and should not imply that a person is being either promoted or demoted. Some employees will resign. Some employees cannot see promotion opportunities, or at least not enough, and will move on eventually. Many long-term employees leave an organization by retiring. Phased retirement is any arrangement that allows people to move on from full-time work to retirement in steps.
All right, so some questions. Why does giving a promotion to an employee have pros and cons within a company? What is the most common type of retirement plan? And why would someone not of age be able to retire? And that is all from us.
Thanks.
Thank you.